because I really want to, I want to be able to highlight Inner City Visions and Alfred and Andrea. The main thing with the task force, the LA Regional Human Trafficking Task Force, which we started under then Sheriff McDonnell, Jim McDonnell, who spoke yesterday. We didn't have any efforts around human trafficking prior to that. We were doing mostly human smuggling cases. And if you listen to the presentation yesterday, smuggling is much different. Human trafficking can come out of a smuggling case, but it's not human trafficking. So in the investigative side of this, we're looking for three things: force, fraud, or coercion. And prior to the task force starting, we didn't have the law in place in California, which is now 236.1, which is human trafficking. But we also didn't have, there's no such thing as a child prostitute, which didn't get implemented till 2016. So when Sheriff McDonnell came in, he had already set that precedent within our department, coming from LAPD and then going to Long Beach, where he had started human trafficking task forces, to say that we would no longer arrest minors who were involved in any sort of commercial sex industry or prostitution. And so we've been following that from the beginning. The task force is built on a federal grant. There are 30 task forces, funded task forces across the nation. There's hundreds of task forces that are still operating outside of federal government funding. But Los Angeles, LA Regional Human Trafficking Task Force is the largest human trafficking task force in the nation. And there's still not enough resource. And I'm not just talking about law enforcement. I'm not talking about from the law enforcement perspective, and I'll get into the layered collaboration that we're involved in. It's just when you're not seeing something for a long time that was not identified as a specific crime or a specific victim of that crime, and then all of a sudden you start looking for it, then it's like the Pandora's box is open. And so we're still trying to manage that. We're up and operational. The budget impact has hit all county agencies across Los Angeles. So, our task force is still solvent. We're still active. We're still doing things. The majority of what our task force does is online and cyber investigations and stings. So although there were operational stuff, vice top type operations, we don't target victims with our task force. We operate under what's called, if you're familiar with the victim-centered approach, we operate under the victim-centered approach, and that's the safety, security, and stability of the victim beyond anything else, including our investigations. So as you can imagine, the collaborative aspect of this is huge. So we're made up of 4 lead agencies, which is us, the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, which is our funded service partner, our CAST, and then the USAO attorney, federal attorney, and Homeland Security investigations. They deal with both investigations on the labor trafficking side and the sex trafficking investigations as well. So that's the leadership team that helps make some of the decisions and policies that we operate out of. And then from there, we're up to about 37 government partners and close to 30 service provider, from prevention all the way to reintegration organizations. And so we do that through the process of, if it's a contract of work being done under memorandum of agreement or memorandum of understanding, and if it's a partnership where we can refer out to agencies like inner city visions, then it would be a memorandum of agreement. And so those are just to put the basic liabilities in place so everybody's protected, and that we can focus on what each of us do, what our important roles are in all of this. We know 100%, the law enforcement knows, that we are not educated in complex trauma. I've heard some great lectures on the 2 days on trauma. I would love to get more and more of that, especially as I'm transitioning out of law enforcement. I'm on my last month, 31 years with the Sheriff's Department, and I'll be working on this issue of human trafficking once I've transitioned out of the department. So I really like to be able to get more and more experience with the trauma issues.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And so the other part of the task force that I think is important, because, you know, like I said, I want to make sure I have time for Alfred and Andrea, because it's what they do is important to me. Again, my relationship with Alfred goes back to 2005. We were working gang intervention, again, under the umbrella of a Better LA. And so when I look at it from a perspective of a collaborative uniqueness, my brother Alfred is like one of the people I look to and learn from in a lot of ways. And so, you know, our experience together has been amazing. We're learning a lot. We're still learning. We have to really become patient in who we are and what our roles are, because we are men. And a lot of the clients, the victims, the survivors that we work with and try to listen to as best we can to get more information on this issue, takes a lot of patience. And so we try to translate that to all the new investigators that come into the task force through our relationships with the other agencies. But we do have a first responder protocol that's backed and funded by the Board of Supervisors, where it's a 90-minute response, where we have housed with us at the task force the MART team from the Department of Children and Family Services and their runaway unit, and their social workers, 2 investigators from the law enforcement side, and advocates from Saving Innocence and Zoe International, who are our victim service providers for the minors. It's a 90-minute emergency response. We all have to be there within 90 minutes to recover the minor. And so from there, they're in the care of the organizations that are being funded, who have more of the expertise than obviously we do. But we're there for a support, and if we can possibly get an interview on the investigation. Our task force is broken up into subcommittees, where we have a service provider subcommittee, we have a training and outreach subcommittee, we have a labor trafficking subcommittee, and then we have the law enforcement subcommittee, which is about information sharing. We also, 2 times a month, the law enforcement meets with investigators and prosecutors from 9 counties, from San Diego all the way up to Tulare County up in Central California, and pretty much everything in between. And so a part of what we're trying to do is become more, where we can share more information without violating confidentialities. So if there's any more questions about it, I mean, there's a lot going on with the task force. Our next general meeting, which we have 3 times a year, will be on August 19th. It starts at 10 a.m., ends at 11:30. It's a Zoom. If you go to the website, lahumantrafficking.com, we usually post all the meetings on that. And again, for us, at the Human Trafficking Task Force. It is housed at the LA County Sheriff's Department, Sherman Block Building. We're right there by the Children's Court, Dependency Court, and it's this 10 and 710. And so we're always looking to partner with as many organizations that can help in this issue, especially if it involves, victims who are dealing with trauma. And like I heard mentioned yesterday, sometimes our victims don't know they're victims of anything. And so the last people they really want to be sitting in front of and having a conversation with is a cop. We are not uniformed. We are 100% undercover. And that's more geared towards the demand side of this. So we deal with buyers and traffickers. That's our main focus. And like I said, we need to really start paying attention to the internet. I know the group that talked about the cyber bullying, they address these type of issues under the same banner, but really because of the trauma issues or the insecurities or this self-identification, more and more we're seeing that these kids really get their identity from their social media accounts and the people that they're meeting online. And so if we're posing as a 14-year-old girl, it's incredible the amount of contacts we get in a short period of time. It was unnerving for me, being a longtime gang detective, to come into this type of an investigation and see how much this has really impacted our youth and some of the vulnerable communities, the youth in our vulnerable communities. And like I said, with the other meetings, we break some of that down. I don't like to put a lot of statistics out there because then we create a particular disparity on what somebody said clearly yesterday, skewed data, because the data is only what we receive. It's not what's really happening out there. And with that, I want to pass this on to Alfred so that they can talk about what's happening at the street level from their perspective. And like I said, I mean, he's my brother. He knows what goes on in the community. I can't do what he does. I can't do what Andrea does. And so we 100% support and back agencies like them. And like I said, try to shine a spotlight, direct funding towards agencies that are doing the work that they're doing, so that we can back support them and being able to, reach out to the communities. With that, Alfred, you're up.
Okay, well, I got to start out by saying what an honor it is to be a part of this conference. There's pioneers in this work, and Ray certainly is a pioneer, as well as Akil and Dr. Deborah. Our partnerships, relationships actually go back, as Ray mentioned, years ago, a decade plus years. In fact, I was in a rehab program, and Ray had walked on campus with his raid jacket. It's OSS. And I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, are you a OSS?" And, at that particular time, it was a different time in my life. And, Ray was out doing the community collaborations, and ever since then, we've just been able to really, partner in both prayer and really just to help our communities. And I'd like to open up by sharing a little bit of what we've been able to accomplish as a community-based organization, and then I'll hand it over to Andrea. So I'll open up with
just one thing. I don't want to interrupt you, Alfred. I'm so sorry. Someone put in the chat that if you have a PowerPoint, can you share your screen? I don't know if you're using one, but I'm just passing on information because I know you can't see it.
Okay, Andrea, I think they're asking for a PowerPoint.
If you're
I
not
didn't-
using one, just go on.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I didn't have one. I don't think Alfred has one, but Andrea will
Andrea has one. Yeah.
share her screen.
Okay.
Inner City Visions was founded in 2007. We're a community-based organization located in the epicenter of South LA. Our start was regarding programming was violence reduction. Florence Firestone had historically been involved in some large-scale violence, and the Better LA collaboration, Akil Bashir, the PCITI partnerships brought in the training as well as the certifications, and this was about a decade ago, and we began to all diligently work towards reducing violence. We know that without freedom from violence, no freedoms can exist. So I'm happy to say that some of those reductions have been drastic. Public health, in one of our partnerships with LA County Trauma Prevention Initiative, we were part of an initiative in Parks After Dark, and we were so happy to say that they evaluated a 45% reduction in murders and violent crime at this initiative. So what we were able to do as well as an organization was we took those same intervention strategies into the local schools. We have a partnership with the local high school, and when the school first opened up, the high school had one of the highest incidents of youth-on-youth violence in the entire South District, and suspension rates. So several years later, after diligently working in the collaboration with school and law enforcement and families and children, they are now one of the safest schools in the entire district. About 5 years ago, we were approached about what it would look like to begin intervention and safe places for trafficking victims. And we're less than a mile away from one of the largest trafficking hubs in California, Figueroa Corridor. So we decided that, well, we'll start using some of the strategies to keep the school safe and the park safe around keeping children that are CSEC. And in 2017, our logic model was evaluated. Cal State LA assisted us, and we had a 85% success rate, which was based on school retention rates. So we knew that a lot of the childhood or children that were experiencing traumas were not in school. And so our partnership included Dr. Ed Robo, one of the board members of A Better LA, and he created a charter, and we asked Dr. Ed, hey, what would it look like in order to create a CSEC, a program around CSEC as a one-stop shop here as a community-based effort. And we're so thankful, I'll tell you that, today we have a 90% retention rate, success rate in that program based on education. Our employment for youth-based services is also at a high 90. So we know that education is key to the success of families and of children, particularly the CSEC and victims of trauma. So we're very thankful for those retention rates. And so as a community-based organization, really at the end of the day, the magic sauce, as they say, is relationships. It's based upon the relationships that we built both in the community, in the parks, and working proactively with a lot of families that are disengaged, historically multi-generational challenges around families. You're gonna have families that are isolated, and being able to be proactive as interventionists and as outreach workers, we were able not only to help the father that may have been on parole or the young boy that may be on probation, but now the young girl that's at risk for exploitation and for being trafficked. So the partnerships have continued to grow, but so does the model as we continue to become proactive in all of our approaches. We know that currently, in light of the pandemic challenges, that we're seeing an increase of runaways because a lot of domestic violence issues that are occurring at the home, the schools are not or haven't been fully engaged. And so we certainly have a lot of our work cut out for us. On the other end of it, we have several programs that we're involved with. We have a food giveaway, and in the height of the pandemic, we're reaching about 500 people a week. So we're reaching about 2,000 people a month with the food giveaways. We also have a outreach for elderly, those that are infirmed. And those type of strategies give us the relationships that we need to build upon keeping kids safe. We've never had one incident against staff or our building. In fact, it's kind of humorous that it's designated a high crime area, but there's graffiti surrounded all over the community. When you pass by our building, there's not one shred of graffiti, and our CSEC children have never had an incident from a predator or a pimp or a gang member. And we're very thankful that because of the relationships that we've built in the community, that we can now create safe places for children. And we also have I believe it's in the 80s, 85% enrollment is from community-based. These are caretakers and families that recognize and have known us as a community-based organization. So they will bring their children or girls that have ran away from home and say, hey, can you please help my niece, or can you help my granddaughter? And we're really thankful that we have, again, I keep saying this over and over, but it's all relational, and that we're able to have those relationships and ties where the family and caretakers are actually bringing these children that have been groomed or have been exploited or even trafficked. So with that, I'm going to give it over to Andrea.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to take this moment to just recognize that a lot of information is being given and absorbed, and I like to take some, I call them resiliency pauses, where we can sort of just be present with all that is going on and let it sort of metabolize through our body. And in doing that, I want to extend an invitation in this activity. It's very simple. If you have a pen and paper or a phone to write on, I just encourage you to write down a list of communities that you identify with or that you are a part of. And I'm just gonna allow a few seconds for you to sort of brainstorm about these. And the reason that I bring up this activity is because we are all part of a variety of communities that have more to do with than just our geographic location. I think so much of the time we think about our community as the home where we live or where we sleep or the family that we're a part of, but community has such a broad, really paintbrush stroke that we can utilize. And so many of the individuals that we serve have multiple communities that they identify with, just as you would, just as I would. And these are certainly some of the types of communities that we can identify with, but there are so many more. And at InterCity, we really strive to honor, value, and welcome all of the communities and the identities that these girls and women and just individuals that they come to us with. Because in doing so, we establish a place where a person is fully seen and provide an experience that is respected from every angle. And I think that's really important when you're dealing with a population that maybe hasn't had that experience before, or certainly it's not the norm. And so something that really is one of the biggest factors in InterCity's success is the fact that we're community oriented and community focused, and that is really our priority. We know that from just a lot of the research that humans are wired for community and connection, and that our need to connect socially is as fundamental as basic needs like food and water. So when an individual experiences social pain or experiences some sort of trauma, the body and the brain receives that as the same as experiencing physical pain. And so in mental health, a lot of times we call those somatic sensations or or noticing what happens in the body when the body goes through a social experience, a social type of trauma or pain. And this starts even as early as in utero. When someone is in the process of being developed as a human being, and even when we are born, we're already learning from our attachments and our attachment styles to our caregiver, to our mother, to our parent, to our uncle or grandmother or whoever, what it is to be in connection and community with another individual. And so it starts even as early as in utero. And some of the science is coming out too, where it's suspected that even generations before and generational epigenetics can pass down these the same information. So it's really quite fascinating. And we even, if you think about the teenage years in particular and adolescent years, as we're forming our own identity, we often seek those that we feel comfortable with, people that we have things in common with, and that's where our community is established. And so what does it really mean to be community-based? We believe at InterCity that where in connection, there can be hurt, there can also be healing. And that's really the lens that we like to take perspective on. Our number one is safety first. Just what we know from experience in complex trauma, the brain needs to receive that signal that says, I am safe and I'm okay. And I have everything that I need in this moment. So we are a safety first, and that goes for both staff and for clients that come in. Knowing that all human beings have that very basic fundamental need to feel safe, to feel stable. We are trauma informed, which I know a lot of places are really, this is really something that people are catching on to, that it's not so much about what is wrong with someone, right? We don't take that perspective anymore, what's wrong with you, but what has happened to you? And how does that inform your behavior? How does that inform how we are communicating right now? And then also, I think one of the things that is unique to InterCity is that we create long-term and sustainable goals. Sustainable meaning we want to develop a plan so that the person that we work with, this client, this survivor, can make these things sustainable in their life. We don't want to come in with this huge non-feasible plan and say, okay, here we go, let's go get it. And then once it is attained, we're out, right? And so making things sustainable, taking each step one by one, I think is very important when working with really complex trauma. And then long-term too. We have this pretty solid understanding that while individual work can be done and there is need and even times for mental health services or wraparound services or even just getting on your feet and financial assistance, that long-term services and long-term community support is really what's needed to ensure that this individual thrives in their life. The difference between empowerment and self-determination and agency, I think, is very small. Empowerment almost implies that I have the power and I am giving you, I am empowering you to do something. Whereas self-determination has the idea and the understanding that you have your own agency. You already can make and determine what is good for you. With InterCity in our program, we really focus on what it is that the client wants and what it is that they hope to make of their life, because then the buy-in is altogether different than when a professional or even somebody that they trust is saying, you should do this, you should try this. The motivation in that situation is altogether different. And it really respects and empowers the individual instead of having a disproportionate display of power overall. We really like to incorporate a holistic view of the person, understanding that they have many facets and that makes them individual and unique and valued and respected and heard and loved. And then certainly understanding cultural components. So part of being a community-based organization means that we also have an understanding of the neighborhood, have an understanding of culture, both racially and the geographic location, having an understanding of social media and nearby schools and what's going on around there, what's going on in families, and any other influences that might be happening to that unique individual and also circumstance. And so something that we've really looked at a lot recently is the case for resiliency. And I think that there are many people that I've come across in these past, I think it's been 6 months, what feels like a year, with stay-at-home orders and with COVID-19. We're being so bombarded with all of the bad, all of the deficits, and it can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming for our personal experience, but also for our body. And how do we respond? I know for me, oftentimes I just shut it out. I have stopped listening to the news in many cases. I have unplugged from social media because it becomes too much. And so I think that type of response is really important to notice, because a survivor who has been through complex trauma, someone who has experienced exploitation or even any type of abuse, really can thrive in an environment of resiliency. It's not to minimize the things that they have been through, but it's really just to focus on and notice the things that they are already doing well, the things that will allow them to continue that personal growth. And so we know that people who live in a constant state of hyper arousal, those who have been diagnosed with PTSD, or even those that have not, that is very taxing on the body. It takes and drains the energy and just does not allow you to live the life that you want to. And so in resiliency, we know that by calming the nervous system and allowing it to rebalance, we can reach those points of well-being. And so this idea of what we water grows, that we can either water the deficits, we can water those things of all the bad things that have happened to you. And certainly there is a need to meet someone in their experience in that way, but also the resilience of how they got to this point. And the fact that they did get to this point, that they have survived and that they will continue to do so, is so powerful. And so we use hope as a powerful tool, and as well compassion and empathy. In inner city, there's multiple chances for a redo. So often I think, especially in the foster care system, children are categorized as high risk or high flight risk. And so if they leave one foster home, that might be a closed door for them, because maybe they aren't allowed back, or maybe the foster parent says they can't come back. And so at inner city, we understand that that flight risk is actually a trauma response of fight, flight, freeze, and appease. And so we allow multiple chances for that individual to recognize how they are responding and how they can try and shift things for their own resiliency. And then certainly highlighting generational resiliency, noticing that previous generations from this individual has gotten you to this point, right? That it's not just the bad that you bring with you from your parents or from your grandparents or great-grandparents, it's also the resiliency. And focusing on that can allow for a really strong foundation. And so inner city visions is really our mission statement is supporting the transformation of communities and celebrating the reclaimed vision for the individual, the family, and the community. We're a grassroots, community-born organization that catalyzes the growth of agency and self-determination within the community. And ICV encourages the utilization of a community's inherent and unique strengths to protect its residents and expand safety to all. So Alfred talked a little bit about the prevention and the intervention. So I don't want to go over this too much, but we do have multiple facets of the program. That it's not just intervention. It's not just helping a survivor after the trauma has happened. There's certainly that aspect, but there's also the prevention, and both I think are so necessary to work in collaboration together. And again, Alfred already sort of touched on this, but having a holistic approach includes job placement. It includes having an individualized educational program, having means for crisis financial resources. If a family is really in a bind, a lot of times we can help them with just getting to that next step. Mental health services and what the agencies that we have partnered with, having peer support on campus, leadership opportunities, and then of course survivor and family case management. And I think looking at this from a holistic approach and really noticing and highlighting the resiliency has allowed for the 90% program retention rate. And so that is all I have.
And this is a great cause. I just want to say, if you want to go in the Q&A after, please let me know through the chat or giving a thumbs up. We have about 10 minutes left in this presentation.
Thank you. So when I started, I had mentioned the victim-centered approach for us is the safety, stability, or safety, security, and stability. And so when we're looking at those aspects, you know, to have the organizations that are involved with that those particular things in mind, it makes it so much more impactful when, you know, those type of things can be done. And as Andrea showed, with the holistic wraparound service, from, you know, even working with siblings or family members, they're able to impact an entire family, not just a individual. A lot of our cases are unfortunately foster care. And so there's a huge issue with housing and placement. And so that's one of the biggest needs. And that's across the board. When we're looking at minors, transitional age youth, and adults, that's a problem across the board, is a stable place for them to feel safe where they're living. And so those are things we're working towards in our goal as a collaboration to be able to address the issues of that. Because if a person obviously doesn't feel secure or safe, then they're going to respond in the way that we see them always in the aspect of law enforcement. And that's behaviors playing out in their worst, you know, possible way. Another aspect that I always address is the mental health issue or the vicarious trauma that everybody that's in this experience. And so to be able to have agencies that can come in and actually work from, you know, the beginning of a recovery is also been helpful for, you know, law enforcement officers who are doing these investigations. And again, the Special Victims Bureau, the majority of investigators are doing child abuse and domestic abuse cases. and we're doing human trafficking. But there's also internet crimes against children, which is our SAFE team, and that's child pornography rings where these people are using these babies to make a lot of money. And so there's many aspects of what we're doing under the umbrella of Special Victims Bureau, but with the human trafficking side of it, we just want everybody to know that it takes a toll. I know my last case, she was a 15-year-old. We got her in some really good settings with some really good resources. And that was a team effort with the organization, Zoe International being the service agency and advocacy agency. But I also found out that there was also another element, and that was the parents. And the parents had nobody to turn to, so they come to the investigator. And that kind of stuff can draw a lot of energy and emotion in a situation like that. So, we're always looking at it from the perspective, or I am from the perspective of my self-care, my ability to have other people to turn to. And so when Alfred or Andrea are showing some of the results, like the girls when they graduate, they'll post that stuff back to us. Saving Innocence and Zoe and Cass do the same thing. We'll go to their sports, the basketball or volleyball games, just to, be able to go and show them that they're supported. Because if they end up having to testify in court, that's one of the that's one of the most stressful times for them. And it's going to be very difficult. And without the full team there with the familiar faces and knowing that they're supported, they're not going to do very well on the stand, and understandably so. But again, our collaborative spirit in this I think has made a huge change in the way that we're dealing with these cases and bringing predators to justice. So I know I'm probably a little early on the ending, but that's all I got. Unless you got anything else, Alfred, that you wanted to. You're muted. You're on mute.
Well, we have a few minutes, so I don't think anybody can run away. So I'll give it a shot. Well, just from the community, from the street level, it just, I don't want to gloss over how vital these services are, particularly towards young children. What I mean gloss over is that we're seeing profound results in the community, again, in a high crime community, and to have caretakers and family members say, here's our granddaughter. She's running away, she's out in the streets, can you help her? Another case, we see a lot of runaways, and we've been able to, through the years, develop a model that allows us to work with caretakers and provide resources for them. One of the more recent examples of that is, we have girls that have had parents that were from the South LA, and they may have moved to Vegas and other states, and these girls would end up in the park, and we're like, hey, what are you doing out here doing our outreach? And they're like, well, I ran away from home. And the conversation is like, well, how old are you? I'm 14. And it's like, well, you shouldn't be out here. Well, I'm not going home. Mom's got a boyfriend. So we know what that's about, and we basically just say, hey, look, why don't you call on, if you're safe and you got to play, and you want to call one of our staff, we can help you. What is it that you need? It's always either hungry, they want a job, they want what everyone else wants, really, at the end of the day. And it's safety. It's always around safety. So having them come to the office and meet our staff, and really at the end of the day, we have some of the local gang members say, yeah, hey, this is the group that helps out the community. So we have several examples of that where she's not going to go home, so we have our staff call the mom, and we're basically saying, look, grandma has said that she will care for the girl, and we'll provide resources for grandma to help her get on her feet. And mom's like, I'll sign over the guardianship, and so we enroll them in school, and we get all the legal stuff prepared, and we have a lot of successes around that. So we've been able to create these models or close the gaps in a lot of services, or where a lot of these kids are running away from home. And it's kind of like, well, how do you take a kid back if she's being abused at home? So being able to work alongside the families and caretakers has been tremendously helpful, really, in building this model. So when I say this about glossing over some of these partnerships, just the idea of what it's like to live in a gang-controlled community, and I'm not trying to sensationalize, but I'm from the gang population. I was a gang leader, so at the hierarchy, I was a predator. I was an apex predator, and as a man that's transformed and is compassionate and sensitive, and now starts to see that, wow, to navigate this community, to go across the street, to walk in these communities is it's all fear. And being able to create these collaborations that allow us to, at the end of the day, that allow us to reach down and help these children and families that could never repay us back. And that's what this is about. It's about standing shoulder to shoulder with the voiceless, children, again, that would never be able to pay us back. And that is why this collaboration is so important. We all have our roles. No one is different than another. You look at the three of us, I mean, how more different could you get? An ex-gang member from a large transnational gang, a clinician, and a gang investigator. And at the end of the day, it really takes that type of model and really people to be able to see that it's not just one group or one person, but it's a collaboration. And we all have a place. We all have a purpose in this fight. Everyone does. And so, I'm adamant and I'm passionate about what I see. Call me an optimist in light of some of the challenges that we're seeing. That I'm an optimist and that I see the resilience, the successes, the courage, and even as a former gang member, I'm ashamed. I'm embarrassed for the role that I played as a male, and to see the courage and to see, I mean, I see it every day. I see it with people that are in mental health. I see it with advocates. I see it with people that are from other communities that are willing to transcend safety and their own home environments to go help other people. So call me an optimist, because I see every day courage and resilience everywhere as I go. So I just, I can't stress the importance of what it is for all of us to continue this fight, particularly, around children and women and abuse. This is something that we really, we don't just shut off our computers and all of a sudden go have a frat and we're done with it. No, we need to really roll our sleeves up. We need to dig deeper, and we need to continue this fight. And that's the reality. I think I'm done.
I think I'm done here. All right, so you guys are actually out of time. Do we have a last remark from Andrea, I believe?
I just want to agree with Alfred that we all have our own role, our own strengths or things that we come to the table with, and all of those are needed and necessary. Yeah.
Awesome. And thank you so much for this. And as you guys have said, I have known you for years. I was actually doing the math when you said that, Ray, and I knew you before I had my son. So, and he's 10 now.
Yep.
Man, children really are age markers.
They are. And Deborah, virtual hug. I mean, it's been some time since we've, you know, we've,
I know.
I mean, just trying times, but it's whether it's virtual or how, I mean, it's great to see you, Deborah.
I know. It's great to see you all. I mean, when I saw your names on there, I was like, yay! You know, because, you know, you guys always bring it out, but I just love seeing everybody all the time, you know, and being in the community and knowing people and knowing, you know, what you guys do. So it's amazing. So virtual hugs all around.